What's up, YouTube? John Maddox coming at you with another episode of Logical, Plausible, Probable, where I attempt to break down the arguments that are being made by atheists and evolutionists as to why we should not believe that God exists and that we were intelligently designed. Unfortunately for them, the evidence is becoming overwhelming that this is the case, but they still cling to the idea that we exist by accident. Before we dive into today's topic, please hit the subscribe button down below and make sure you get notified of when our next videos are coming up. In this video, I really want to talk about something that I've noticed across the board as I watch these videos on YouTube. You read books, you watch documentaries and different debates by the supposedly top-level philosophers on both sides. And one of the things I've really noticed is that all of the evidence in favor of God's existence gets completely dismissed by the atheists. And when you really contemplate things like genetics and the fine-tuned universe, and there's just a plethora of different elements that make it blaringly obvious that a creator exists, but they just completely refuse to even accept or even really consider the evidence. So why is that? Why are they so afraid of really taking a look at the incredible amount of information that's now available? You know, we got the internet now, folks. You can go online and quickly look into these things, but they just completely dismiss it. Why? The only thing I can think of as to why they wouldn't want to even think about these sorts of topics is if they crack that door, then the facade they've built and the followings and the influence and all the different things that they're currently enjoying go out the window if suddenly the premise that you can just dismiss all of this is no longer a reasonable conclusion. For example, in my recent debate with R.J. Downard over on Modern Day Debate, it was fascinating to me how, as I started to break down the aspects of the genetic code and how it is clearly and accepted in academia that it is a programming language, it is a code, it fulfills every aspect of what it means to contain and to transfer information and control logic rules, codon structure, syntax, semantics, all of just different components about it, and really saying, hey man, how do you conclude, even if you want to go down the rabbit hole of evolution, how do you conclude that the capacity and the requirements for DNA to exist and actually function and create life, how did that happen without an intelligence happening first? And it was very interesting how he just over and over again completely dismissed it. And this is another reason you want to subscribe, because I've got a whole bunch of videos coming up very soon to break down our entire debate and hopefully educate him on why he is refusing to even accept any premise that he doesn't currently view fits his current mold of our existence. Now let's get into some of the reasons that I think evolutionists and atheists are so unwilling to even consider any kind of alternative to their current positions, and that is fear. They are afraid of any possibility that they are wrong. But the first fear I think they are truly unwilling to even consider is that they might be accountable. They have a fear of accountability. So if God exists and they are wrong, then all of the positions they have taken over the years, all the effort, all the people they have convinced that he doesn't exist and that there's nothing beyond this existence, if they're wrong about that, then there is going to be a massive level of potential accountability for them in the eyes of God from their perspective over somebody who never went down that path and trying to convince people that the opposite is true. Second fear is the fear of being wrong and ultimately destroying their sense of self-worth. So if you have spent years, decades, your entire adult life in trying to come up with reasons, evidence, explanations, and everything about it has been under the auspice and the conviction that your position is true, and you are now considering your own self-worth and what you've done with your life. Well, if you've been wrong about what has served as a fundamental foundation to your entire existence and your mindset, your lifestyle, everything has been about evolution, chance, and ultimately there being no God, then it's going to mean, if you admit that you were incorrect, that everything you've done in your life was completely pointless. And I can't imagine going through that mindset and trying to come to that realization. And it's why I say that they're so resistant to even considering alternatives, is because if they even accept that some of them might be true, then their entire life has been pointless. And that is a realistic fear. A third major fear I believe they have is having to change their actual perspective on life and just experience and what is going on in the world around them and how do they perceive it. So you have to think about it. If you've spent your entire life thinking there is nothing beyond this one, then you probably have had a completely different mindset as to how you approach things, whether it be relationships, accomplishments, legacy, all of those different things. If there's nothing beyond this world and there's no other reason for existence other than being here by accident, then how you actually approached life is going to have been dramatically different than the person who felt there was something much more to their existence than this, and that the time we spend in the human body is nothing but a learning experience for what comes beyond when we go into the next life. And when I've thought about this quite a bit, because I almost died about 7 years ago, and I've thought about that a lot in the time since then, of how I was able to have a much different perception of the trials and struggles and the ups and downs and all the things that happened to me after those health issues I went through, that if I had not had faith and belief and trust, and also had gone down and looked for evidence and explanations for why I might be going through these types of things from a much bigger perspective than I live in this finite world, I probably would have cracked. And I actually had the opportunity to speak with a lot of folks in going through similar types of struggles, and it was very interesting to me how so many of them who did not have any kind of perspective other than this is it were just so overwhelmed and crushed by the struggles they were going through, when if you look at it from a bigger perspective, how heavy it is, how big it is, how overloading these kinds of struggles in life can be, become much smaller and much, not necessarily easier to handle, but much less overwhelming than when you live in that finite space. And so when you really think about that in the context of what you hear from the atheists and the evolutionists and all these people who are, the skeptics, they are, in my opinion, afraid that if it turns out that, number one, they are accountable to a higher power, and number two, their entire, not necessarily the entirety of their life, but a huge portion of their life have been almost pointless, then being forced to change their entire perspective, that is a reasonable fear, and it would be very difficult to overcome unless you truly accept that there is more to this life, and you don't have to view it as a very short temporal experience, and then there is nothing after that. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video on the fears of atheists and evolutionists. I hope it spoke to you. I hope it really gave you some insight and makes you think about whether or not the conclusions that are being reached by the atheists and the skeptics and the evolutionists are neither logical, plausible, or probable. Make sure you subscribe down below, leave some comments, like, share. Much appreciate you engaging with my channel, and I hope that you will check us out for our next video. That's it for this episode. Come back for more logical, plausible, probable.